Man, 2020 has been off the wall for many adventure game fans. For starters, we've seen a lot of fantastic games come out. Not only are we getting some new exciting IPs coming out, such as Old Skies, we're also receiving announcements of old IPs making their triumphant returns. Ken and Robert Williams are developing a remake of Colossal Cave Adventure. The guys from Andromeda finally released Space Venture after a good decade. And even Simon the Sorcerer has conjured up a prequel. But probably the news that shook the world was when Rod Gilbert, the creator of Monkey Island, announced a new game was being made, on April Fool's Day no doubt. But Ron, being pretty adamantly against April Fool's jokes, was not joking. Monkey Island was making a return, in a game aptly named Return to Monkey Island. Once Return to Monkey Island was unveiled and its graphics were shown, it caused a huge rift in the adventure game community. So much so that Ron was even attacked on his blog and had to disable the comments. To me, it was something truly baffling, but I want to make one thing clear. I loved the graphics of Return and was a big fan, but I also understand that some people may not have enjoyed it. I made it clear that regardless of the art style, I would go into it openly and it wouldn't ruin my experiences, which apparently grated on a few people, and I found few people complaining about me online. But at the end of the day, I realised something. I just didn't care. In half a year's time, I would be making my return to Monkey Island. For many fans, people questioned how Ron would proceed with his Monkey Island, having made numerous claims about pursuing his own version of Monkey Island known as Monkey Island 3A. But confusion arose when Murray, the beloved demonic skull from Curse of Monkey Island, was making a return, making the events canon. It in fact becomes apparent when going through the introductory scrapbook detailing Guybrush's past adventures that all of the games were canon. Although certain details were also not really acknowledged, but I'll discuss those later. But for now, let's buckle down, grab a grog, and return to Monkey Island. But before we begin, we're treated to a choice in difficulty between an easy and a difficult mode, and naturally, being a big boy, I chose the harder option. Besides, I could always cheat later on. Return to Monkey Island begins with an enactment of LeChuck's revenge ending, which left a huge cliffhanger for fans of the series. Things take a slight change when it's revealed that the two people who were supposedly Guybrush and Chucky's parents are in fact not their parents. The introduction in Big Whoop Carnival acts as the game's version of a tutorial, because as we know, point and click adventure games are notoriously difficult to pick up on. Throughout the game, one of the main items that the player will hold is a to-do list, which lists their objectives. In Big Whoop, the player solves some simplistic puzzles, such as buying scurvy dogs. However, they also receive a list of things they can do, such as learning to skip a boring lecture about anchors, or learning how to run fast, which I don't think serves any gameplay purpose. The overall goal is to find your real parents, and you do eventually, stumbling across your father, our beloved Guybrush Threepwood. As it turns out, the controlled character is Boybrush, Guybrush's son, who sits and listens to his father talk about a story he hasn't told before. One about his return to Monkey Island, opening the game for real. Once again, after 30 years, players made their triumphant return to Mealy Island. Or, well, 22 years seeing how we revisited it and escaped from Monkey Island. But unlike Escape though, Return is less of a bastardised version of the island we once knew and loved. I mean, what the heck is this, guys? C- for effort. Guybrush approaches the lookout, much like he did in Secret of Monkey Island, stating how he would actually be finding the secret of Monkey Island for realsies this time. It also turns out that LeChuck is back on the island, mounting his own expedition to the mysterious island, once again putting Guybrush in the crosshairs of his arch enemy. A lot of the locations appear as they did in Secret of Monkey Island, including the dock and the beloved Scum Bar. Even Good Cobb makes a reappearance, voiced by the immaculate Matthew Mercer. Compared to Secret, the Scum Bar is a lot less rambunctious, but it has its share of pirates, infinitely making it a lot better than the Lua Bar that took its place in Escape from Monkey Island. Which begs the question, when did the Scum Bar regain control, since Escape made it clear that it was solved by Ozymandias? Another drastic change is that no longer the three important looking pirates drinking grog in the bar, instead replaced by Captain Madison and her flunkies acting as the new pirate leaders. After laughing at Guybrush's request for an expedition to Monkey Island, Guybrush has a mighty tantrum and leaves the Scum Bar. Even the mightiest of pirates can have the mightiest of temper tantrums, it seems. Guybrush makes the decision to sneak his way on board to LeChuck's ship, posing as a swabby, but then mutinying against the captain. However, it leads into issues, as Guybrush obviously needs a disguise and to bring his own mop, leading into the objectives for part 1. While Mealy Island is similar to how it was, there are some changes. For example, a few of the locations of Secret have just disappeared, such as Captain Smirk's home and Meat Hook's. Another change is that our beloved tiny little pirate, Wally, makes his triumphant return, having opened up his own map store on the island. What is probably the most recognisable change is that Elaine is no longer the governor of Mealy Island, which makes sense since she relinquished it to her grandfather, H.D. Marley, in Escape from Monkey Island. But no mention of this is made in relation to him, and instead, the new governor of Mealy Island is Carla, the Swordmaster, and one of Guybrush's old crewmates. The more things change, the more they stay the same, such as our beloved victim of society, Otis, who finds himself once more in prison for picking flowers. And as always, the Voodoo Lady returns, as cryptically confusing as always, although she actually does provide Guybrush with what is a hint book, which the player can use if they get stuck in the game. And well, aside from Otis in the prison, Stan also makes an appearance, arrested for some variety of pyramid scheme, but he insists he doesn't want to be broken free, so I'll let him be. As Guybrush explores the island, more puzzles become available, such as his quest to find a mop tree in order to make his own mop, seeing how the chef of the Scum Bar isn't willing to be part with his. Or even tell Guybrush where it is without some sort of quest. Another minor feature of Return to Monkey Island is the inclusion of trivia cards, which Guybrush can stick in his trivia book, and lets him answer questions relating to Monkey Island and its creators. These cards appear at random, and I don't think you can complete them on one singular playthrough. However, they carry on through other saves. It's a nice little addition, although getting one answer wrong means you lose that card for good. Whoops. It's also worth mentioning that the game features changes in dialogue through an optional toggle in the options menu known as the Writer's Cut. I haven't really figured out why this was removed by default, but from what I can see, this provides even more content and even more character interactions, such as the three pirates, who will appear if the option is toggled when first on Mealy Island. The option was probably added to cut down on confusion with interactions with unnecessary characters at the time, but I feel that's part of Monkey Island's charm, and I wish I'd known about that before proceeding to part 2. But hey, that's all the more reason to play again. As Guybrush traipses around Melee Island, LeChuck becomes aware of his foe's appearance and attempts to join the crew. What's really interesting to note is that LeChuck's appearance is his zombie form, much like he appeared in Monkey Island 2, which would make it difficult to gauge where exactly the game takes place in the timeline. Let's take a look at LeChuck's history of forms. We've got human, ghost, zombie, demon, all of the above somehow, a giant stone disappointment, demon again I guess, human once more, and now we're back to zombie. It's like the circle of life, but with a lot more dead people. One of the more interesting locations in the island is the Museum of Pirate Lore, built where Carla used to reside, and which showcases many pirate memorabilia, including many items from Guybrush's past adventures, such as Cape Capsize's wanted poster, a melted grog cup, and the 4 pieces of the map to Big Whoop. The important item here is the eye patch, which is used to disguise Guybrush, which helps him gain access to LeChuck's ship. But before he can do that, he still needs to power up the magic of the eye patch and to find the fabled mop tree to carve his own map, both of which are found in the Melee Island forest, which makes another appearance. Upon arriving in the forest, one of the first things I tried was to see if I could recreate the dance steps from Secret of Monkey Island, but unfortunately, I didn't seem to have any hidden secrets in that regard. But the forest remains as difficult to traverse as ever, and instead Guybrush enlists the help of Wally to create a map to it. Much has become the norm for Monkey Island games, maps aren't as simplistic as pointing out the route to the right path. Rather than follow the directions in the map, the player is expected to instead look for the flowers that are scattered near the paths and use them to reach the tree. And eventually he does, much to the dismay of the woodland animals as he completely devastates the tree and their habitat. Again, whoops. Melee Island features a few variety of puzzles, some more odder than others. One particular puzzle that I found oddly charming was writing an apology letter to Carla, except rather than using a card like a normal person, Return to Monkey Island decides that the latest cool thing to use is a voodoo frog that doesn't even really work with voodoo. I probably spent what could be considered an embarrassing amount of time trying to figure out where I went wrong. I tried everything, even apologising for an explosion which Carla doesn't seem to remember, which is weird seeing how a cannonball meets ship deck explosion cost her a lot. Look, Carla, I'm sorry, okay, just let me take the goddamn book. I should have known that in going through all this dialogue that it would not lead anywhere. In order to truly apologise, Guybrush needs to learn more about Carla, which is handily found on a nearby gaudy statue of the Swordmaster, which I just so happened to miss. With the mop and disguise attained, Guybrush secures a place on LeChuck's ship, appearing as an undead crew member, leading into part 2. Aboard the ship, Guybrush is tormented by the first swab, Gullet, who locks Guybrush in the hold and forces him to clean, continuously throwing down grime and blocking the way out. But fortunately, all is not lost as Guybrush also finds an absolute icon and fan favourite, Murray, the demonic skull, who inexplicably is stowed away in a crate on the ship and doesn't recognise Guybrush's undead form. Fortunately. After managing to escape by prying open the porthole and lubing it up good with the grease Gullet throws so that Guybrush's butt can fit through it, Guybrush finally finds that sweet, sweet freedom that all swabbies strive for. Outside, Guybrush can also dive underwater, bringing back his famous ability to hold his breath underwater. Although nowadays, he can only hold his breath for 8 minutes. And of course, the first thing I do when I notice Guybrush is underwater and a timer appears is to let that timer drop. I sat for 8 minutes straight, waiting for the glorious moment that I could die in a terrible toy box game. Very similar to Monkey Island 2, Guybrush slightly embellishes his untimely demise, much to his son's chagrin. Guybrush admits he could hold his breath for longer, adding on another 6 minutes, making this a new breath-holding record for our mighty pirate. But of course I let it run out again. And again his son admonishes him, and Guybrush returns underwater with another 4 minutes added on. This is the player's final warnings, as this leads to a final scene showing the bench now empty and dialogue indicating that Guybrush did indeed drown and was survived by Elaine with no children before the game returns to the title screen. On the deck, LeChuck and his crew are preparing the same potion Guybrush used in Secret of Monkey Island. The potion is finished, apart from a flattened skull to which LeChuck allocates the task of finding one to Guybrush. Unfortunately, the only skull around here is very much unflattened, but after some minor adjustments, Guybrush finally has his pressed skull for the potion. However, Big Dumb Gullet decides now is the opportunity to ruin everything by pouring the potion on the floor, insisting that Guybrush clean it up. This very much catches the anger of LeChuck, who tosses Gullet overboard and promotes Guybrush to first swab, but also leaving the crew with the dilemma of how they'll get to Monkey Island without the potion. In part 2, the main task is to find the way to Monkey Island and convince the crew to sail begrudgingly, while also stealing LeChuck's map to the secret. But unfortunately, without the ingredients, this makes it nearly impossible. Fortunately nearby, Captain Madison and our crew are sailing, preparing their own recipe to find Monkey Island, but lacking one pressed skull. Unfortunately, there's enough Murray around for everyone. Many of LeChuck's crew members are unwilling to sail to the island, seeing the secret as a fool's errand. Therefore, most of the act is trying to convince each member of the crew to agree to the expedition. A lot of these puzzles are simple enough, such as getting Flambe his coveted Scorched Alaska, and Bob some new reading material as he dangles and allows the blood to pull at his head. I mean, if ghosts had blood. For the most part, I didn't find this part too difficult. Although I did slowly drive myself crazy trying to figure out how to make Flambe's dessert even more horrible to his liking, and while I knew it had something to do with the ember near the cannon, I couldn't put two brain cells together to figure it out, and I inevitably had to look up a hint. I've never felt more like a failure in my life until this moment, especially when I learned that the solution was to cut off the end with a knife. Great. I don't know what got burnt more. Flambe's dessert, or my self-esteem. With the crew satisfactorily motivated to travel to Monkey Island, and Guybrush nabbing LeChuck's secret map by replacing it with his Mop Tree map, Guybrush sends Murray off on another adventure, blasting his demonic skull friend over to Captain Madison, allowing them to travel to Monkey Island and allowing the crew to follow them. LeChuck, impressed by the crew, is delighted and promises extra grog rations. Inspired, the crew throws various items into the air, although Guybrush unwittingly throws his enchanted eye patch, but shows his true form, and results in LeChuck charging at him in insult sword fighting. But alas, LeChuck cheats, opting to punch his foe and sending him flying off the mast of the ship, leading into part 3 of the game, Monkey Island. Monkey Island is again similar to how it appeared in Secret of Monkey Island, with many landmark locations such as the cliff and the giant monkey head, although it looks like only the bottom part of Monkey Island is accessible, with the north being blocked off and no rowboats available. Aside from this, it also feels like all traces of Curse of Monkey Island and Escape have disappeared from the landscape, with no clear lava flow, or even signs of Big Whoop. In fact, the giant monkey head looks unmoved, despite literally being a huge giant monkey robot. Using LeChuck's suspiciously comprehensive map for a Monkey Island game, Guybrush finds himself trapped by Captain Madison, who swapped LeChuck's map and aimed to trap LeChuck to interrogate him. Before killing Guybrush, he insists he can help Captain Madison and her flunkies by accessing his ship, which is enchanted to only allow crew on board. And Guybrush was never technically fired, just thrown overboard. As a result, Guybrush makes a rather tenacious and volatile truce with Captain Madison, who offers a partnership, which is obviously trustworthy. The main goal of Part 3 is to access the map by using magic, which requires 3 areas relating to LeChuck, his theme music, catchphrase, and his favourite foods. All of which are things I didn't think I needed to know about the fiendish pirates, but well, here we go. Obviously, Guybrush isn't very welcome back on board the ship, but through the aid of his new partners, Guybrush manages to take the guise of Gullet by taking his secret poetry and allowing it to be enchanted to take his form. Nobody really questions the sudden reappearance of the former First Swab, allowing Guybrush to roam the ship freely once more. Fortunately, LeChuck is off on a fool's errand, following the mop tree map Guybrush left, which, hilariously enough, takes him to the Monkey Island's version of the mop tree. This gives Guybrush free rein to enter his foe's chambers and steal his diary, where he learns his catchphrase, which I'm fairly certain I've never once heard LeChuck utter. Ever. Attaining LeChuck's theme song is simple enough, as he can distract Flair by ringing the bell for a meeting, and she, unfortunately for her, leaves the music she is writing for her captain. With the music known, Guybrush can return to the giant monkey head and play music by bonking Murray on the head, along with other skulls he finds on the island. Receiving LeChuck's favourite food is also simple enough, which is tentacles with daisy sauce. There just so happens to be a squid nearby, which Guybrush can remove the tentacle and bring it to Putra for her to cook LeChuck's favourite meal. After playing the music, reciting LeChuck's supposed famous catchphrase, and eating purple tentacle from Maniac Mansion, the map to the secret is revealed, although in the process causing an earthquake. Before Guybrush can see the map, he is betrayed by Captain Madison in a move that no one saw coming. They take Guybrush to the top of the cliff and push him off, while also tossing Murray. I immediately laughed as I realised that this was the same spot where there was a rubber tree, only to have my expectations dashed as Guybrush lands on the stump of the now cut rubber tree. LeChuck appears, taunting Guybrush and leaving him to die. Crushed, both in the sense of losing the map and his mangled body, Guybrush laments his loss, although Elaine appears, who finds Murray who stole the map to the secret. Overjoyed, this miraculously cures Guybrush, and he realises the secret is kept in a safe at the Voodoo Ladies on Mealy Island. In order to sail it back, Guybrush and Elaine decide to use the debris from Guybrush's original ship, the Sea Monkey, and rebuild it into, well, this. Christening it as the Sea Monkey 2 and using Murray as the new figurehead. Together they set sail back to Mealy Island, leading into Part 4. Back on Mealy Island, the previous earthquake has caused significant damage to the island, totaling the Scum Bar, among other areas, with residents bombarding Carla with requests for financial compensation. Meanwhile, LeChuck and Captain Madison are duking it out in combat, both desperate to be the victors to the secret. In the end, they decide to truce in order to team up to find the secret, although intending to betray the other. In the International House of Mojo, Guybrush finds the safe, but finds that it is locked away, requiring 5 golden keys, which are scattered across the Caribbean. Outside, Guybrush meets with Whitey Bones, who has her own key, although refuses to hand it over. She does, however, provide leads to where the keys might be. Some of these keys happen to be found on other islands, with one being hidden away on Terror Island, which sounds like the ultimate holiday destination, and the other key is found in Bermuda, kept by the Queen and ruler of the island. Bella Fisher, meanwhile, disappeared somewhere in the ocean in a shipwreck, taking her key with it, and one key was given to the locksmith's mother, although the locksmith was too overcome with grief over the death of her mother that she never claimed it, and was told they had been destroyed. Part 4 is definitely the longest act in the game, taking place across the seas, allowing Guybrush to travel to several other islands and other ships, including LeChuck's Le Ship, in a mannerism very similar to Act 2 of Monkey Island 2, LeChuck's Revenge, opening up many different tasks for Guybrush to undertake, such as learning how to spin a fishing story just right, and challenging the monarchy in freed trials, and finally gaining the mantle of Queen that he so highly covets, before dismantling the monarchy once and for all. On Terror Island, Guybrush travels through dark and dingy caverns before stumbling across a trapped Herman Toothrot, who Guybrush proceeds to wrangle a golden key from and leave the hermit trapped in the dark caves. Note it's Herman, not Grandpa, not H.T. Marley, no nothing. Even later, Elaine confronts Guybrush about Herman being stuck in the cave with no mention of him being her grandfather, which is interesting. Perhaps a sly retcon of an already controversial retcon? Guybrush's journeys also take him to Scurvy Island, where Elaine is working on campaigning to promote limes to scurvy-ridden pirates, taking a book from Stan, who helps recommend how to market properly by removing all science naturally. The Blacksmith's key is perhaps the weakest link in the series of misadventures, as there isn't really anything particular to this quest. Given a note indicating that the key was destroyed, Guybrush takes it to the courtroom in Bermuda, with the judge being like, "Lol, nope, we haven't destroyed it yet, here you go, congratulations." It's pretty disappointing. I would say it's the equivalent of walking into Elaine's Booty Island Mardi Gras party and happily walking out of the map piece without anything going wrong. It was just too easy, I couldn't even begin to believe it. However, if I can be perfectly honest, I found the rest of the chapter to be pretty tricky. I noticed a lot of people mention that they found the game too easy, but I feel for me it was just about right. In fact, I found myself overthinking things. One puzzle involves Guybrush challenging a local monarch to a raw fish eating contest, much like those performed at Buckingham Palace. In order to win, he needs to be a little underhanded, a little devious, a little like a pirate. Providing his own fish, Guybrush can season them with incredibly hot spices. It would make a Nando's Nandokin wince. Knowing this, I knew just what I had to do. I spiced up those bad boys, travelled back to the bait shop, got some untainted fish, and came back, only to find my tampered fish were gone, and I couldn't understand why. As it turns out, all I had to do was spice up the fish in the bucket, and then take one of the untainted ones from my inventory to win. Overthinking. After locating all 5 keys, Guybrush takes them back to the safe in the International House of Mojo, finally unlocking what has taken many lifetimes for many a pirate. Only to find that inside is a chest with yet another lock, and one severely cheesed off looking LeChuck standing at the doorway. The chest, pilfered by LeChuck and Captain Madison, is taken back to Monkey Island, and Guybrush chases after, leading into the final act of the game, inside the giant monkey head. Act 5 is where things get a little dicey, for me at least. After a moment where Elaine brings up all the shitty things Guybrush has done and questions if the secret is truly worth it, Guybrush heads inside, determined to finally find the highly coveted treasure. Inside are some peculiar puzzles, as Guybrush keeps loudly announcing his appearance to LeChuck, who is already preparing the entrance to the secret. After following, Guybrush finally enters the vicinity of the fabled secret of Monkey Island. And here, we reach the ending. And better call in human cyborg relations droid Mark Zuckerberg, because things are going to get meta. As it turns out, after all the build-up established, there is no ultimate confrontation with LeChuck and Captain Madison. Inside is Melee Island, but as a theme park attraction with animatronics of residents and real-life Elaine and Stan. From what it seems, Guybrush isn't a mighty pirate. He's a flooring inspector, playing in a theme park that Stan designed. And nearby is the highly sought chest containing the real secret of Monkey Island, a t-shirt. As expected, I completely called this earlier before Return launched, as I made several joke tweets about receiving the game early, and well, I guess they all came true. Somebody call Apollo and tell him not to bother coming into work today, because I clearly got the gift of prophecy thing down to a T. With the adventure complete, Guybrush and Elaine head home, and Boybrush voices disappointment, asking what the real secret was and voicing he doesn't know how to do an ending. After one final dialogue option that decides a post-credit ending scene, the game ends. And naturally I chose my friends, because cute. And because that's exactly the same joke I made using my newfound prophetic powers. As you might imagine, the ending is controversial with fans. I'd be lying if I hadn't been a bit let down by the ending, but it's honestly something I was expecting. In the build up to finding the secret, many people warn Guybrush that it might not live up to his expectations, and they'd be right. 30 years have passed since the original Secret of Monkey Island came out. 3 decades of speculations, of fan theories, each more convoluted than the last. I've spoken to a few different people, and some have made claims that they enjoyed the ending, whereas some see it as controversial. A few people stated that they wanted to know what my views on the game endings were. And if I were to be truthful, I would probably say I'm more indifferent towards it. I wasn't outraged by the ending like many others were, but I believe I wasn't exactly wowed as everyone else who liked it was. But the more I dwelled on it, the more it began to make sense that it failed to live up to our expectations. For 30 years we've speculated on what the true secret could be, and I don't think it could have been any other way. So was I disappointed at the ending? Sure, but it wasn't that big of a deal to me. What I think bothered me more was that at the same time, I was a bit let down by the fact that it seems that everything was all a theme park attraction, and our mighty pirate was never, well, a mighty pirate. At least that's what I took from it. But the more I dwelled on it, the less irritated I was. For a lot of fans, the ending struck home, as many of them had played the game 30 years ago and were parents themselves who for 12 hours found themselves back in the nostalgic days of their childhood. And that is the point of Return to Monkey Island. It's about returning to those days to relive the glory. But at the same time, I think it also gives closure to a lot of the fans who see that it's okay to move on in life, but also to just stop and contemplate it, much like Guybrush does silently at the end. I can get the frustration from people. For me, I was hoping for another showdown with LeChuck and the nefarious Captain Madison, and it just ultimately didn't lead anywhere. And it was such a shame, in all honesty, as we lacked the quintessential butt-kicking chapter that Monkey Island is known to have, through out-of-the-box thinking to outsmart our foe and win the day. The final part of the game is a puzzle to open a door. And that was honestly what disappointed me most out of all this. Of course, Guybrush doesn't have to snap back to reality. If Guybrush wants, he can use the keys Stan provides to open the door in the alley. Guybrush returns inside the monkey head and he can leave, as the game indicates that he refuses to admit what he saw, ending the game. Return features a few different endings, although these are mostly derivative of the 2 main endings I described above. Accepting that Monkey Island was a fantasy, or denying that and returning back, basically making the return to monkey meme a reality. Depending on actions, and mostly the dialogue options, Guybrush can state what the true secret of Monkey Island is, and this impacts a post-credits scene, which the lovely folk at the International House of Mojo have compiled and I've listed below. Return to Monkey Island makes it clear that the most important aspect of the game is the journey, rather than the ending. And sure, I don't think I was as impacted by the ending as many others. It could just be the fact that I just can't quite relate yet. But what I think is important is that it does indeed give us an ending, even if it's not one we were looking for. And while I was personally indifferent towards the ending, Return Still Lives is one of the best returns to point-and-click adventure games, and is a stellar title in the series, and could even be seen as a fitting finale to the series overall, if Ron hadn't already tantalised our taste buds with mention that this is unlikely the final game. Stop teasing us, Ron. This game was already absolutely wonderful, even though it lied to us all and featured no physical monkeys whatsoever. Want to make sure you don't miss out on the video for the 100% real and definitely coming out Monkey Island 7, The LeChuck Awakens? Then make sure you don't forget to subscribe to Noir Reservoir and click the little bell down there to be kept up to date on all future Noir Reservoir videos. And if you want to help support the channel, please consider liking the video and sharing it with any adventure game aficionados you think will appreciate it. And finally, why not consider following my Twitter for all the dank memes? I'm sure you won't regret it. Probably. So until next time, my friends, I'll catch you later.